Get away from her, you bitch!
Hello, and welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. This is Anna, co-founder of the Final Girls and your podcast host. Over the next few months, we'll be tracing the lineage of female monsters in horror cinema. In each episode, I'm joined by a special guest to dive deep into a monster movie or two. Today, we're tackling a stone-cold classic, one of the very few sequels that arguably surpassed the original. A film that is revered by both sci-fi and horror fans. I'm talking, of course, about Aliens, the James Cameron directed sequel to the seminal sci-fi horror film Alien. If you need a refresher on the plot, Aliens picks up the story of Lieutenant Ellen Ripley. After floating in space for 57 years, Ripley's shuttle is found by a deep space salvage team, and she's sent back to the planet LV-426 to establish contact with the terraforming colony. Once there, she encounters the alien queen and her offspring and has to fight them off to survive. I'm joined in this episode by film critic and podcast regular Rihanna Dillon in revisiting the film. We go deep on the dynamics of the crew, on the incomparable Ellen Ripley, Vasquez, themes of motherhood, and of course, the alien queen. As a warning, we'll go into quite a lot of detail on the film from very early on in the episode, so if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, rectify that immediately. But after that, come back to the episode and enjoy the discussion. If you're not fussed about spoilers, then stick around and maybe that'll encourage you to revisit the film. And also, this episode does get a bit sweary, so I wouldn't recommend putting this on loudspeakers wherever you're listening to it. If you're cool with that, enjoy the discussion about Aliens. Hi, Rihanna.
Hi, Anna.
I don't know why I did that voice, but it's just really nice to speak to you again. It's been a while.
It has been. This is great. It's really fun. I always like chatting to you.
Oh, thank you. No one's ever said that before.
That's bollocks. That's absolute bollocks. They say it all the time.
So we're going to chat about Aliens, which I got a tip that was one of the few horror films that you enjoyed.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
That's the plan.
All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! Are you? Get on the ready line, Marine! Get something to do! Get on the ready line!
Get your light up here.
Keep back, don't scare her.
Movement! Talk to me, Hudson!
I got signals. I got readings in front and behind.
There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Get them out of there! They cut the power.
How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
There's movement all over the place!
5 meters, man. 4.
Aliens. This time, it's war.
I really love Alien and Aliens. I really do. Like, there is just something about those films. I think because sci-fi horror is one of my favorite genre. Like, The Thing is just up there for me. It's just one of the best films ever made, along with Alien. So but also I've realised I hadn't watched Aliens for a number of years, like maybe like 5 years. So revisiting it was really fun and really fucking terrifying.
So tell me about your relationship with the film before, and kind of has your opinion changed of it on the rewatch just for this?
So I got into these films quite late on, actually, and I hadn't really properly seen them, again because I thought I'd be too frightened, because I am so like wimpish when it comes to horror. So I actually saw it at like one of those all-nighters at the PCC at the Prince Charles Cinema. So I saw Alien and Aliens back to back at like, you know, whatever time it started, like, you know, didn't get out there till like 3 or something. Yeah. And it was actually a really good place to watch it. It was like you're with a really great audience who love the films, and the atmosphere was fantastic, and it was just a treat to see these films in the cinema when obviously, you know, otherwise I wouldn't have had a chance. So yeah, I really loved that, but it did mean that I don't think I've ever seen the director's cut before. So I was watching it this time on one of Mike's DVDs because he had like the quadrilogy, and you could make a choice between theatrical or directors, and I knew we were doing directors, and I was quite intrigued to see what James Cameron like allowed to be cut out of his film. So yeah, it was really fun revisiting it, and it was great. I just think it's such a brilliant action film as well, and when the jumps come, they are so like well earned by that point, and you've kind of really built up an affinity. Obviously you have this incredible relationship with Ripley already thanks to Alien, but then like the rest of the team, they're so kind of, I mean, perhaps more stereotypically, but just so defined, and so you have your own relationship with every single one of them by the time they meet the aliens, which is quite clever. We're
going to be talking specifically about the director's cut, and there's quite a few significant scenes that were cut out of the theatrical version that made it onto the 1990. They call it on the Blu-ray, they call it a special edition. It's the director's cut, basically. So what are the key differences between the two versions that stood out to you? So bearing in mind it was a long time probably since I've seen Aliens, a theatrical cut, but there was that whole section where they sort of, so a lot of it is world building, so it's that section that really stood out to me that I definitely hadn't seen before, where you sort of see like Newt's family, and they're sort of driving underneath the ship, the alien ship, and that really kind of, I don't know, it added quite a lot for me actually. But then later on in the film I kept being like, oh, I don't recognise this bit, but it was all like these little fragments and I can't really remember. You might have to guide me on this. But that initial bit, just seeing a bit of like the colony, I think was actually, it was, I totally understand why it was cut, but it was really exciting to see it. Yeah, and the thing that stood out to me, which I didn't realize was originally a deleted scene, so I figure I must have seen the director's version, the director's cut originally, and just didn't know that it was a director's cut. Right. But once I was reading, after rewatching the film, about the film and the differences between them, apparently the scene with Burke and Ripley, when he is explaining to her what's happened to her while she was in status, it is revealed that she had a daughter that was 11 years old when she was on the Nostromo, and grew up and grew to old age and died while Ripley was asleep, essentially. And that was a deleted scene, but I remembered very clearly from the first couple times that I watched Aliens. So I must have seen the extended version already. But I think like that's such an important scene for the themes in the film and for Ripley as a character. It's so important, especially when you see her reaction to the way that she acts around Newt later on. And there's like one specific bit where Newt is like falling and like Ripley is trying so hard to get her, and just that moment you just know that she's just seeing her daughter and just not and trying so hard not to let her daughter slip through her fingers again. So it just feels like quite a bizarre omission to have from the original theatrical cut, because I think it's, you need that empathy as well, and you need to have the emotional response to Ripley, because you kind of strip away all that and, you know, you could see her as being quite cold. I mean, she isn't at all, but, you know, if you took away that at the very beginning, you need to have that connection with her on a very human level. It's kind of like that bit in Interstellar as well, isn't it, which they kind of riff off with Jessica Chastain and Matthew McConaughey. And
her aging while he's away, and it is very devastating. The whole idea of a childhood sort of disappearing while you're in space. It's quite a scary, upsetting thought.
Yeah, so let's chat a little bit about Ripley, who's probably one of the greatest female characters
100%
ever.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only survivor, with Jonesy the cat.
With Jonesy, your fave.
Yes. From the Nostromo. And the first good chunk of the film delves a lot into her post-traumatic stress disorder and how she deals with essentially being the sole survivor of that alien massacre. So what do you make of the way that they evolve the character of Ripley in the sequel?
I think because you see her, as you say, it's such a incredibly strong action hero in the first film, and it does feel very standalone, and you don't even sort of think about their backgrounds, where they've come from, their lives really before this disastrous trip into space happened. And so that was really interesting to see how it opens up then into her being a mother, and then suddenly a grieving mother, and then also a woman who has lost all of her friends, everyone that she knew probably from that period, the fact that she never goes back to Earth, and she just stays, and picks up a loader job, which obviously comes in handy later on, but the fact that she doesn't have those roots to return to because they've all been obliterated, but just by time more than anything else, lends so much to her character, just makes her human and whole. And I think it's really great because we don't often get the chance to have that what's the word, like a extension of a character. And where, we were all in love with her anyway from, everything that she does in the first film. But then with the second one, and just seeing so much more of her, how important her logic is, and all the empathy that she has, and the fear, and also the fact that she is so terrified, I think is really important. Because you know how sometimes these films can sort of be a bit like, they're not terrified, they just want to go back and they want to keep fighting because that's all they know by this point. And she does not want to do that because she, rightfully knows the fear that comes from these creatures and the damage that they can inflict. So I think that James Cameron does a really great job with building on Ripley's character and not at all changing it, but just enhancing her.
Yeah, it's so rare that we get to see, especially in kind of these sequels to horror films, or in this case kind of sci-fi horror films, the aftermath, the psychological and emotional aftermath.
Yeah.
I instantly think of Scream 2 as another good example where we see sort of the final girl go through the PTSD that comes with surviving an ordeal like that. Although here, obviously, it's set in a very dirty future, and there's aliens and spaceships and giant corporations involved, and not just a university campus. So one of the things that really stood out to me as well, that was, I think, gives it a layer of sinister world building as well, that you were touching upon earlier, is the idea of this corporation who is but is ultimately kind of the real villain, as opposed to the alien or the alien queen, kind of, because they're trying to manipulate Ripley and manipulate the situation in order, like she says, for a percentage in the film. So kind of what did you make of the character specifically of Burke?
Oh god, so
such
interesting. Oh my god. And I remember that reveal when the first time I watched it. I remember it so clearly, and I was so angry because it was just like, how dare you put our Ripley through this again, just to like bring one of these creatures back? What the fuck is wrong with you? And that whole idea of capitalism and capitalism being so evil, and these kind of corporations. And I know that Cameron was sort of like inspired by like the East India Trading Company, and like these the ideas of these like Western companies going and colonizing other areas but just to sort of mine from them stuff. It was all about, it was nothing to do with, you know, letting these settlers go and have a life. It was about mining what they could find and how they could reap the rewards and monetize the fucking aliens. I mean, that's crazy. And so the fact that Ripley is so just calls him out on that straight away, and that moment when she's like, that moment when he turns off the CCTV, and you know 100%, because before he's been very, you know, his sort of insidious nature does definitely come through, but that's the first time when you realise that he actually wants her to die, because that is a easier option than her fighting him all the way about bringing an alien back, willing to sacrifice her and Newt. So of course that. And I love that immediately she says, it was Burke, he did this. And immediately they all believe her. And I think that's really important as well. There isn't, you know, in a lot of these cases, there's this back and forth about this, oh God, it was this guy. No, we don't believe you because how could they? Like they do with Ian Holm almost in the first one. And it's just very satisfying that this team gets it because they're not part of this evil corporation.
I want to talk about the team in a bit, but first, to your point, which is excellent, because it's such a contrast to an earlier scene at the beginning of the film where Ripley is explaining what happened on Nostromo to this basically boardroom full of men in suits, and they're all a bit like, you know, that phrase where it's like, well, we're sorry you read the situation that way. Yeah, but it's not really what happened, is it? And like you say, when she lays out what's happening with Burke and what he's actually doing and scheming, the crew instantly believe her. They're like, yeah, fuck this guy. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's kill him.
Yeah, rightly so.
Yeah, you're right. That sort of that spectrum, and it's quite funny because in between that, then you have the team who, when she's telling them about the aliens. And you're expecting perhaps a similar response like the boardroom guys. But actually their response is just like, okay, but where are they and how do we kill them? Like, enough of this chat. Like, they like... Yeah,
because they're Marines. They're like space Marines. They're not scientists. They don't give a shit about, you know, the potential capitalization of the aliens. They're like, no, it's weird, it kills us, let's kill it first.
Vasquez literally like lines up like a pretend shot, and that's just her only reaction, because that's the only thing that she can kind of fathom is just kill. And she doesn't care about like the emotional like trauma that they inflicted on Ripley. She doesn't care about, like you said, about the money. It is they start off as these quite sort of like two-dimensional characters, and then obviously it kind of builds from there.
So picking up on that, what do you make of the new team that we encounter? Because the difference there compared to Alien is that that's not an established crew. Ripley is very much kind of the outsider who's joining them, and I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't really know what she'd been through with the aliens, right? So she's just this
random sort of consultant. They say she's a consultant.
That the corporation has forced on them. So what do you make kind of the dynamic between them? Because I think it's very interesting. Like, it's very macho and anti-macho at the same time.
There are so many different dynamics going on, aren't there? Like all these little sort of pairings and partnerships, and like that, the kind of classic, like you say, Marine machismo of like calling everyone by like women's names, and Vasquez has to be incredibly butch herself to try and almost like keep up with them. Like she's almost like the stereotype of a female soldier, because she's like she starts exercising as soon as they come out of the sleeping pods. Another character says, is it Bill Paxton? Is it Private Hudson who says to her, like, have you ever been mistaken for a man? And she's like, no, have you? And then... I love that. It's such a good line. So quick. And then another one, like, high fives her, and they obviously have some sort of, like, friendship or relationship. It's never quite explicit which way, like, I don't think it is a sexual relationship, but they have like
they're pals.
Yeah, they have a really good bond. So just all these kind of little micro connections between them, and then like the sort of as you go higher up the rankings, seeing how the response to all of them, it isn't. They all do seem to be a little bit more on a par, I suppose. Like the hierarchy isn't quite so clear to me anyway. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I kind of love their dynamic because it is very much like, it's not scientific at all. They're not scientists. They're not there for research. They're kind of like space cowboys. They've got a real... It reminded me a lot of sort of army training films of that vibe. And I love Vasquez. I'd kind of forgotten just how quippy she is.
Yeah.
And also just how amazing it is to see kind of... Ripley is also an incredible action hero, but she, you know, the big thing about Alien and Ellen Ripley was that she was written as a man, and then they gender flipped the character, but they didn't change the character. Whereas I think this film kind of really hones in on her identity as a woman in that space. And Vasquez is really interesting because she is like a masculine presenting woman, but she's, you know, she's a woman and she's extremely ripped and super strong and like very kind of, you know, loves a fight. And she loves a fight, and she's gonna take no shit.
She normally wins the fights, doesn't she?
Yeah, 100%. I love this. Like, there's a point where like she does a chest bump with with the guy who is like her military buddy, and the way that she puts down Bill Paxton's character as well. It's still, and I think that's like incredibly powerful to see on a screen. You know, and she dies a heroic death. At no point does she balk. She's not whimpering at all. She's not trying to prove herself. She just is that hardcore. Yeah. I mean, she is problematic because it's basically a white actress playing a Latina character.
I didn't realize this until I just looked it up, and it's very bizarre. Like it's so weird. Fucking weird.
It's really weird. And I also did not realize that when I watched it as a teen, because I think I probably watched it dubbed, so I didn't catch the accents or the way that she spoke. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sort of Latin stereotypes in that role. Yeah. That doesn't remove from the fact that Jeanette Goldstein, who plays Vasquez, is kind of an incredible presence on screen. Yeah. And she fully kind of owns every single scene that she's in. She was my favorite, and the way
really
she fits into the dynamic with all of the guys and kind of ups the macho antics.
Yeah, well, she's like the most trigger happy because like even, you know, that scene where they make it so hilarious because they're like, oh, by the way, you can't fire because obviously it's going to cause enormous explosion, which Ripley is the one who works that out. And and everyone's like, oh, what? Oh, gutted. Like, because they just, all they want to do is they're just bros that want to just shoot shit up. And then she does it anyway. She's like the one that, and it is that thing where that sort of macho attitude actually is really detrimental to the operation because she's firing bullets. Not only does it cause like explosions, whatever, but also like she's the really trigger happy one. She is the one that is just like shooting off left, right and center, which obviously causes all these explosions, but also creates this cacophony of noise, which means that the you know, like all of the commands that are coming in from the ops room just aren't, like, no one can hear them, and which means that they end up not falling back, which is what they're being ordered to do, and they end up dying themselves. And so it is quite detrimental, like her sort of that macho attitude is actually quite detrimental to the whole operation, and not just hers, like all of them. But it's quite interesting, like what you were saying about how she is so hardcore and doesn't have like a sort of, I don't know, a frayed bone in her body, and you compare that to somebody like, you know, Private Hudson, Bill Paxton's character, who you think is going to be, because he's the most outwardly loud and in your face about everything, you sort of think he's going to be the tough guy, and he so isn't. He's the one that's just like crying like every 5 minutes. I mean, fair play to him, like I would be too, but it's just so unexpected, and it's a real like, yeah, like you say, gender flip, role reversal. And also so funny.
Oh, he's hilarious. Bill Paxton, R.I.P., amazing actor, has like the monopoly on being able to play these astounding douchebags in film and still be charismatic.
I know. It's mad, isn't it? And I remember like the first time just being like, oh, I kind of wanted him to shut up a bit so I could it was a bit shrill. It's just like, oh, stop! You're being so whiny and high pitched. I just want to listen to Ripley.
Oh my
and then
God.
Rihanna, kind of rewatch it with all the
I think that's the first time in the history of any sort of podcast or film criticism where the words shrill, high pitched. I would just want you to shut up and listen to the other character have ever been used referring to a male character.
Man.
Well done.
But it's so true with him because he's just squealing all the time. And you're like, dude, shut the fuck up. We just want to hear like actually what people, and they all tell him to shut up. That's what I love. They all feel that. They're all telling him to shut the fuck up.
He's the Dwight
and
of that
get
ship.
back in his box. Yeah. Yes. Oh, and that's great. And again, I don't, you've got to think a bit of that was deliberate. With having him as the sort of really panicky, like the least level-headed. I think it was really important that is his character.
And what do you think of Hicks, who is played by Michael Deal, who is kind of like always has a little bit of a vibe with Ripley, but it's never developed into anything more, which I've always been really grateful for. Like, we don't need a love story in Aliens. We really don't. There's so much going on.
I know. I am so glad you asked that because Hicks, I do fucking love Hicks. I am such a fan. But I'm also like, I am a hopeless romantic. And so the idea that him and Ripley have this spark, which of course, thank God, as you say, they never act on during this film because that would be so inappropriate and unnecessary and weird in the midst of all this chaos. It's much more realistic that they have a little bit of, I don't know, eye fucking or whatever instead of any like actual verbal stuff. I mean,
classy, Rihanna.
Yeah. Oh, this really is a podcast of highs and lows. Oh God, stop it. I can't remember what I was going to say now.
I'm sorry. The eye fucking distracted.
Well, basically, the only bit of actual flirting they do is revealing their real names to each other, their first names to each other. And I just think, oh my God, like that tension when he's just like, come back, Ellen. And you're like, whoa! Like, you don't need a sex scene.
Like
just
when
have
he's
that.
like, my name is Dwayne. And it's like,
I mean, unfortunate. I know, not great.
Like, could have been
Sorry
better.
to all the Dwaynes out there.
Yeah. I mean, the only acceptable Dwayne, apologies to all the other Dwaynes, is Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Everyone else.
And even that is pushing it, I'll be honest.
There will be no disrespecting of The Rock on this podcast, Rihanna.
So yeah, I'm so with you on the fact that, I think having his presence, because he is like, I guess, he gets called a grunt by Burke and there is an element of that, but he is such a reassuring presence and he is commanding and he has a lot more, I don't know, he has like enough intelligence to absolutely, like, I don't, that sounds really patronizing. He has enough intelligence, but he has enough intelligence to actually follow what Ripley is saying. He's not, again, he doesn't doubt her. And that's not just a sort of because of their sexual tension, because he absolutely respects what she does. And just from the very beginning, when she wants to help out and they're like, well, what can you do? And she's like, this. And I think from that moment, he like laughs and that's it. They're kind of away because he realizes that she's not, I think in a lot of these sorts of sci-fi films, like the consultant is sort of
incompetent,
superfluous. Yes, exactly. They're incompetent. And so I think immediately they sort of have this idea of what she might be like. And as soon as she upends that, he's sort of like putty in her hands a little bit, but in a professional way. Like he kind of gets that she can do anything. And so that idea that he will essentially follow her to the ends of the earth to kind of do what she needs to do and to make sure that this alien doesn't get out is really important, because she's always calling the shots. And the fact that he's happy to follow and does it with a lot of grace is, I really love their relationship in this.
Yeah. I love him. I think he's
I thought he died as well.
I did think
was
he
like,
died.
At the end, I was just like, oh my God, he's still alive. This is great. This is so exciting. I honestly thought that it was just like her and Newt and Bishop that just like flew off into the sunset.
I didn't even, to be honest, remember that she sort of salvaged Bishop, which is weird because he's then kind of in the sequels, but the chronology gets so weird that I was always a bit like, oh, just erase them from my memory. But yes, I'm very happy that they kind of all fly away and are saved for a bit, at least.
Well, we don't have to go into Aliens 3, so...
No one needs to do that.
So in this, they're a little happy family.
Yes, that's how we choose to end this episode.
Forever.
But
mostly.
But picking up on that, one of the key central themes, which I think runs through the whole of the Alien franchise, but specifically is drilled down and explored on so many levels in Aliens in this film, is motherhood.
So
what did you make of the multiple ways? There's no right answer to this. What did you think of the multiple ways and layers in which Cameron explores the ideas of motherhood through Ripley, through her relationship with Newt, through the alien queen, and so many other things in the film?
We've already touched on her being a grieving mother and that whole idea of having your child grow to be older than you, which is so fucking weird, obviously. And so that is established really early on in the film. And then also seeing Newt so early on and which again, I'd sort of forgotten that we see her this early on. I thought you just saw her for the first time when she sort of comes out of that little tunnely bit. So the fact that you see her with her mother and father, and then you have a motherless child and then a childless mother from the beginning, I think is really important. So of course it was like these, the plus and the minus, the batteries sort of like coming together to connect in some way. I think they do that in it's not at all subtle, but it doesn't need to be. And I think the fact that they're both grieving, they both naturally are drawn to each other, and the real maternal instincts come out in Ripley much more than any of like the other men, for example. They don't particularly have paternal instincts, do they? And then with seeing like the alien queen and just the eggs and that horrible like tubey gloopy thing is so and just the idea that this is the creature that is spawning all of these horrendous aliens that have killed everyone that she knows and loves. It's a really interesting thing to have a mother versus mother face off, actually, and quite unusual in this way. Oh, it's so gross. It's giving me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. Just that scene where you realise that everything, all the eggs, and they kind of go back to that a lot in Prometheus, but not nearly as well as that sort of reveal in this. And also that reminder that they are grown and they're a family and they're not just, I don't know, it's weird. Like this alien has an instinct to create, and she's actually devastated when her babies are destroyed and burnt up, and so much so that she gets vengeful, which the fact that this kind of gives her another level of intelligence by that motherly instinct, by following Ripley and hell-bent on destroying her more than anyone. I just think it's fascinating, and it hasn't been explored to that extent before. It's like aliens they don't have that same drive that humans do, but actually they do.
Yeah, and the fact that they chose to gender the alien, because in the first film, and up until that point when we see the queen, it's like, well, aliens are aliens, like they're not human, that's all we need to know, they're gonna kill us, it's pure survival instinct. But here, like you say, she's not only gendered as kind of a mother, a female, a queen, but then she has this level of intelligence and recognition. She recognizes what Ripley is doing, and she is going after Newt to essentially take her revenge on her child. This is they're not Newt is not her biological child, but she is very much, and throughout the course of the film, their mother-daughter bond is very clear, and her kind of protective instinct towards Newt goes to extremes. So when the alien queen just kind of pops out, and in kind of in the first ending when they think that they've made their escape, and absolutely literally breaks Bishop in half.
Oh my god, that's so upsetting.
Oh fuck, that was so much. And then you just,
it really was.
I don't know if I was projecting onto her, but I did sort of just see the smirk on her face, like she was just going like, I got you now, bitch.
Yeah.
And
very possibly, mate. Very possibly.
What did you make of kind of the design of the creature? Because that's such a big part of this franchise.
Oh my god, the fact that it was so black, like I know that's weird, but just like the sort of I'd always thought of it as being that sort of metallic-y, shiny, again like wet look kind of thing, and she looked so much more like I don't know, some sort of like vampire bat. She almost had like these, not quite wings, but these things sort of sticking out of her shoulders.
Yeah.
Like,
and she also had like legs coming kind of from her, let's say, stomach area. So she had like a spider almost.
Yeah. Yes, she has everything, doesn't she? Because she also has like the mouth within the mouth.
Yeah.
Which is so horrible. Oh god, that I was really like screaming at the TV when Ripley's in the loader. I was by myself in the flat and I was going, no, because it's just that has always creeped me out so much, having the mouth within a mouth that just jumps out and you don't know. It gets so close and it's so rank. It's so disgusting. It's such a clever design because it's like there's so much there are a lot of like there's a lot of phallic imagery in that, in having like something like bursting forward, like unsheathed, and then coming out. But then also, of course, like you see vaginas everywhere in this film, and especially like in just like the opening title with aliens.
Yeah.
And is it and you just see that one of the letters like glowing open, it just kind of starts opening ever so slightly, and it does look like labia. It's really strange. And I know I'm not the first one to say that about aliens, but it is just when you kind of forget about it, it becomes almost like a stereotype, and then you watch it and you're like, no, it's all there. That imagery is all in there.
Yeah, it was always an alien, but it's very much emphasized and kind of put to the forefront. I think they really take the creatures out of the shadows in this film and make it so much more explicit. Like we kind of, if you're so inclined, you can sort of pause and, almost analyze all the design and the this is not a sentence I was going to say, but like all the vagina shapes all around the layer, the droopiness everywhere, the design of the alien, kind of the droopiness. The drippiness.
What are you saying about vaginas? God. You can't say vagina and droopy in the same sentence.
I preface this by saying this is not a sentence I expected to say today, but you brought it up. There is like it is like almost a grotesque alien version of a woman's anatomy.
But also the way that it builds up, like you say, because you see it in the walls and the ceilings first of all. So they're essentially in this sort of alien womb when they're having that initial face off, all of them. It's not just a layer, it's literally made out of alien. They are the walls, they are the ceiling, they are the floor, because they keep kind of treading on them, all these bits. And yes, all these little, but then their tails unfurling. That's very like masculine imagery. And that's like the threatening bit. As soon as you see them unfurling and pushing their pointy bits towards them, that's when you need to get worried. As Bishop discovered. Maybe I'm reading too much into this now. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. But also I quite like the fact that in Alien you do just have it in the shadows. I sort of almost prefer that with any horror where you don't see it explicitly, because I do think that oftentimes your imagination can do so much more damage than what you see on screen. Although the image of the Queen is so chilling, but actually when you see all them, when Hicks like pushes up the ceiling when they realise that the aliens are above them, and he shines a torch on that, and you just see that split second, and it's so great that you just see a glimpse. And again, if you pause, fine, but it's just that glimpse. If you sort of saw them whole, and you do see them more whole in this, and a lot more of them, so you can gauge them a bit more. I don't find that quite as chilling somehow. I don't know, do you?
What I actually find chilling is not the aliens when they're kind of multitude, the smaller ones. Let's call them like the kid aliens, the teenage aliens. And or even the alien queen is terrifying, but what I find terrifying is the fact that she's intelligent, the fact that she can plot and plan and can target someone specifically. It's not just a killing machine, which in a way kind of completely desensitizes you to them as a villain, because you're like, just kill it. It's not even almost a living creature. It's just a thing that's just gonna attack you. When it's the slow movements that I find terrifying as opposed to the quick ones, which is why when the queen kind of unfurls herself and shows herself, especially in that last confrontation, I was like, oh fuck, it's because there's a certain level of almost of toying with her prey that I find really scary.
Yes, intimidation.
Yeah, like I enjoy jump scares as much as the next guy, but what really terrifies me is kind of the slow, tantalizing, like, I'm gonna get you, but because I know that I'm stronger and more powerful than you, I'm just gonna play with you a bit first, like a cat that's playing with a mouse that he's about to kill.
Yeah, you're so right, actually. Yeah, that is incredibly frightening, because it does show another level of intelligence. I suppose you've seen that though. You've got cats, right? You've got a cat. So have you seen? So are you like really frightened that cat's going to kill you?
My cat doesn't play with anything. I mean, have you seen my cat? He's fucking huge. He can like 100% strangle me.
That's so funny. It's all about your fear of the cat, really. Nothing to do with an alien queen. Yeah, it is really interesting. But also, you know, when you have like the mother, that going back to like the mother thing when she's like, get away from her, you bitch, that classic line. Weirdly, I just only this time watching it, and I was like, there's a bit in, again, didn't think I was going to talk about this in this podcast, but there's a bit in Harry Potter in the 7th book where Molly Weasley starts fighting Bellatrix the Strange.
I know exactly what you mean.
And she's like, leave her alone, you bitch.
Yes.
Yeah. Or she says something like that. And I was like, oh my God, did JK take that from Aliens? Because it's this mother that's going towards this terrifying presence and she's trying to protect her daughter. And I was like, holy fuck. Revelation time.
That's a great moment. And also, it's I think the first moment as well where we see Ripley sort of acknowledge the alien queen sort of equal status to a degree of sort of a mother protecting her children.
Yeah.
And she's a mother protecting her child, and this kind of head-to-head confrontation. And, you know, it is, you know, a hardened kind of space marine woman sort of decked out in this weird transformer-like metallic suit, protecting her child and killing a giant alien in space. So it's not exactly what we think of when you think of like two mothers battling each other to protect their kids, but it's exactly that. If you boil it down to that, this is all a film about mothers protecting their children. It just so happens that one of them is a giant alien queen protecting her alien eggs, and the other one is a, you know, space marine protecting an orphan child that she found on an alien colony.
It really does invent the idea of motherhood, doesn't it? Because it's not, you know, neither of them are traditional mothers, I suppose, in that sense. And yet they're but they're, that instinct that we were saying, that protective urge is like, it's just so much stronger than anything biological for Ripley. You know, it doesn't matter that Newt is not her biological child. She will die to save her. over and over again.
Yeah.
Which I think is really strong, really important that comes through.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you wanted to talk about?
Try to remember. I started off making notes, and one of the only bits that I've got is I've written, she looks like George from the Famous Five. So that went well.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I basically was just like, she's got George's hair. She's like that tomboy look, because like George, hear me out. George from Famous Five always obviously wants to be one of the boys and is a tomboy and likes being thought of as a boy. And it feels like Ellen Ripley is like reinventing the image of the tomboy, because she's walking around, you know, in her vest and knickers, and is quite flat chested and is quite and has this short hair, but yet, you know, she is the one who is the most oh god, this is going to sound awful, but like the most female in terms of like her logic, because she is the cleverest person in the room. She is the one that makes all these connections that nobody else can. She's this incredible mother, and the fact that like her femininity makes her this incredible like all-round action hero, whereas, you know, at first she was already an incredible action hero, but almost like, as you say, her gender was originally male, so that didn't make a huge amount of difference, whereas in this one, as you said earlier, it drills down, and so it's kind of just reinventing the idea of what you perceive as femininity and what makes somebody female. And it kind of throws off, I think, up to what we'd seen up until then, traditional ideas of femininity and the female. It's kind of what I meant by she looks like George from Famous Five.
That's an amazing point to make from that bold statement. And to start kind of wrapping up, what do you think has been the influence on other female monsters on screen?
I probably don't know nearly as much about this because I've avoided so much horror over the years. So there are quite a few female monsters that I've never seen and never experienced. But one that does spring to mind is in Under the Skin. And I think that's quite an interesting, I don't know, sort of merging of alien and female and the monstrous, and also, I don't know, the heroine, the hero, because with Scarlett Johansson's weird alien person, woman, she's like the most, you know, one of the most stunning women in the world, and yet she has that same thing of like, she's like enticing these men. She's like learnt how to use the feminine form in a way of enticing people back to her lair. And then if you look at like the Alien Queen, you know, it's not so much about hypnotizing or tricking people, but just in that same, like you were talking about, like spiderweb way, they kind of, when they come into her lair, they're never going to leave again. They're trapped there forever, and she uses them to spawn. And I guess with Scarlett Johansson, she doesn't, from what I remember, she doesn't exactly like spawn, but she, you know, that's how she feeds off them, doesn't she, these men that she entices back. And that because it's so gender specific, Under the Skin, because it is always these men that she brings back, it sort of feels like that vengeance that we were talking about. It almost does feel a bit like a vengeance movie, like a sort of revenge, you know there's a sort of rape revenge films that are quite specifically against men with a female antagonist, and it sort of feels a bit like that, even though obviously there is no rape in it, but it does feel like a revenge film on the whole of the male population. So it's quite interesting to have that gendered idea of the monster compared to Alien, Alien Queen. But apart from that, I can't really think of anyone.
That's a really great comparison, and we'll be covering that film in depth on later on in the series as well.
Nice. It's a really, it wasn't my favourite film, but it did something so interesting, something I hadn't really ever seen before, and the use of music in that is another level, isn't it, of sound design.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wait to rewatch it. I haven't seen it in a few years.
Yeah, me neither. I don't think I really. Maybe I could watch it again, actually. There was just so much dread in it. And again, you know, you're talking about that slow intent. That Under the Skin is all about the intent and about the waiting. It's like a waiting game, isn't it? A lot of the time. Oh, God, yeah, it's hypnotic.
Thank you so much for your time and for your insight on Aliens and for rewatching it for the purposes of this.
Welcome. Oh, I really enjoyed. That was such a treat.
Good. So where can people find out more about what you're doing online?
If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Rihanna Dillon, or you can catch my reviews, my film reviews and TV reviews every Monday morning on Six Music with Lauren Laverne from about 10:30. So yeah, do listen out for that. I can't promise there'll be loads of chat about monstrous women, but I will do my best.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of the Final Girls podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you can, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help a lot, and we really want to know what you think of the work we're doing so far. You can find out more about what we do on thefinalghost.co.uk and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Final Ghost UK. You can also follow Rihanna on Twitter at Rihanna Dillon, and I tweet a lot of memes and occasionally useful links on Anna B. Demented. Thank you for listening, and next week we will be back with a double bill of Frankenstein-inspired horrors.